everyone. It looks like we are live here on YouTube and Facebook and some other platforms across our network. I am Andrew Birkle, co-host of Hail Yes, a podcast on Michigan football and basketball, joined by Tony Garcia, my partner on that show, and a special edition, a Spartan Speak crossover with Graham Couch of the LSJ and Chris Solari of the Detroit Free Press. So, guys, we already kind of got the dialogue going. It's a weird dynamic around this year's game where, you have some fans on the Michigan State side possibly, rooting for things to not go exactly how you would expect it to, just it's a weird dynamic. So, Graham, I'll start with you. Who do you think wants Michigan State to lose more, Michigan fans or Michigan State fans, considering all the circumstances surrounding Jonathan Smith?
Yeah, well, I think there are some Michigan State fans who are, I think there are a lot of fans who think they're just done with him, or they moved on, or they don't want him to be the head coach beyond this season. I think once the game starts, though, that's a mental place to get to that I don't know that many MSU fans will be able to do, because these are deep-seated feelings. This is a rivalry that people deal with year-round in their lives in all sorts of ways. And, I think, there is some concern from some people who are completely out that this is a path back in for Jonathan Smith and what that looks like. And so I'm sure there's some of that. I'm sure there's some people that, because I hear from them. So but I do, even with them, wonder how much they'll feel it in truth once the game begins and once all the feelings they have towards this rivalry and towards Michigan and towards their own school come up. But it is definitely a thing out there, because I do hear from some people.
Yeah, I think a lot of it might have to do with how the game starts, right? If MSU goes down 14-0 in the blink of an eye, you're going to have fans turn pretty quickly and it's like, I'm done with this whole thing. But if it's close and it's the third quarter and it's, after halftime, next thing you know, everybody's kind of invested in the game. And I think it's going to be, once you get that vibe in Spartan Stadium going, it's a totally different thing. But Tony, I think you kind of have a different opinion. You think it might be kind of a negative crowd up there in East Lansing?
No, I don't know about that necessarily. I think Graham he does a great job of keeping the pulse of things up there. And so I do agree with him about once the game kicks off, whatever colors you're wearing, you're not actually going to be rooting against that team in the moment. But if those fans could separate the immediate gratification for what is best long term for them, I don't know what the answer is, but things don't look like they're going very well up there. And, but obviously Michigan fans are ready to pounce. Michigan is ready to pounce. They want this one. They haven't won 4 straight in this rivalry since 6 straight from 2002 to 2007. Currently, they're on a 3-game winning streak. So, hard to believe it's been almost 20 years since Michigan's won 4 in a row. So they are looking to further drive a stake in it. Is that right? Am I doing that right?
It sounds right enough. Chris, you're kind of like the historian of Michigan State football for the Free Press. Would you have like a comparison that comes to mind from other Michigan State games this kind of reminds you of? Because it's kind of hard to find one, at least since the D'Antonio era, in my mind. It's just kind of weird circumstances surrounding this entire game.
Yeah, I think you got to look back maybe all the way to, even the Bobby Williams game that basically cost him his job isn't really one that kind of is a parallel here. The rails came off completely there, and plus there was the famous answer of Bobby Williams saying, "I don't know if I lost the locker room," when someone asked him if he lost his team. I don't know. And then people forget that there was also an incident with one of his running backs dragging a cop on a car downtown Lansing after the game. So a lot of those things played into it. So it was not really this exact same scenario.
Things were not going well.
Yeah. Even the George Perlis, George Perlis' last year, things were unraveling. And that's about where my history goes back to the 93 game when Michigan State won in East Lansing. So, but this is so much different. Maybe the John L. Smith era, but at that point, I think a lot of people were checked out on John L. Smith after that Notre Dame game, that there was the collapse in the rain. So this is different though. But I also think that there's different parameters here when you talk about the money still involved, the timing of it after a year and a half. So, whether or not Michigan State fans want a loss, I think first of all, that goes away whenever a ball's kicked. Whatever pragmatic idea you think you have, your emotions take over at that point.
Yeah, it's kind of easy to say, but as a fan, it's harder to actually feel that way once you see the jerseys and, the opening kickoff and all the semantics that, we all kind of love about football. But Tony, throwing it to Michigan here for a second, we've kind of talked about how this has been kind of a roller coaster of a season, right? Like up one week, down the next. You score 63 against Central Michigan, and you look a little flat against Wisconsin, right? And it's just like kind of a little up and down, and including, you look, Michigan has one of their worst games of the year at USC, or probably the worst game of the year, and then plays pretty darn well. You called it the most complete game of the Sharon Moore era last time against Washington. So how does Michigan enter this game, and does that change, the dynamic of this rivalry in your mind?
It feels a whole lot different than when we were coming back from LA about 12 days ago. I'll say that much. They were at that point, they were 4-2, 2-1 in the Big Ten, and both of their losses felt like the two losable games, right? At Oklahoma, at USC. If your best win of the year was going to be at Nebraska, I mean, for Michigan standards, that's just certainly not up to it. But after both of those games, you mentioned the other two. They put up 63 on Central Michigan. Now, Central Michigan, there's nothing to take away from it, but 63-3 is really all you can do. You don't control the opponent there. And then this last week against Washington, I think really instilled a lot of hope back in this fan base, both for what this year can be and also just the direction under Sharon Moore. 24-7, turning Damon Williams Jr. over 3 times. He had one pick the entire year, and they have back-to-back in a 4-play span, punctuate both of those short fields with touchdowns, and really 24-7. I mean, that's an impressive outcome against a team that's really capable of putting up some points. And so what was weird about that USC game was the defense just getting gashed for 224 yards. That was the most they'd given up in my time on the beat in 4 years here, and the most they'd given up since going back to the COVID season when they gave up like 350 to Wisconsin. And so there was a lot of angst around the fan base and around how things were going. But now, if you look at the path forward, Michigan State, Purdue, Northwestern, and then Maryland, it looks like the opportunity very much is there for them to be 9-2 going into that Ohio State game at home with everything on the line. So that Washington game, I mean, and Michigan said it. They said, I mean, they really had to sort of save the season there. It was one of two ways that they could go, and they chose the winning path. So they are certainly riding high going into yet another night game in East Lansing.
Yeah, I'd argue that the USC game and the Nebraska games were really, like, if you're a Michigan State fan looking for hope, the way Michigan looked in those two games are your hope today, because Nebraska is an awful team, and that was a narrow win, even though they controlled the line of scrimmage. And then Michigan State, if you believe in the transitive property at all, which is certainly a flawed theory in college football, but Michigan State was better offensively against USC than Michigan was.
So do you agree with my assessment of Nebraska, just loser DNA? I mean, I know Michigan State lost to them, but that's because I think Michigan State's in a worse place. It just feels like Nebraska has loser DNA to me. That's the phrase I'd been with them.
They're just not very good at the line of scrimmage. That's whatever that is, DNA. Like Michigan State looked like they had, Lawrence Taylor on their team for a few quarters, and they can't put any pressure on anybody. So like that just wasn't representative of who MSU is. And when you saw, you thought maybe some issues had been fixed with Michigan State, and then, they don't put a fingernail on Mendoza of Indiana. So like I think more of it, I don't know what's in the DNA in Nebraska. Obviously, they spent the last 20 years trying to, recapture what they were. And, whether Matt Rule's the guy to do that, or whether they have the resources to do that, or all that stuff is something that, is a question. But yeah, I think it's more just they're not very good. And Michigan State gave that game away. And part of the reason we're having this discussion in the frame that we are is that Michigan State lost a game down there they never should have lost. They really gave that thing away. And so, and beyond the UCLA game then, which was sort of a hang your head and looked deflated. And that's why Jonathan Smith's in this boat with people. There were people who were out on him before then, but that's why the idea that he won't be back next year is a thing.
Yeah, keep this in mind. Nebraska gave up 5 sacks to Michigan State, right? Michigan State has 13 sacks all year. So that's a large chunk of that, right? And it's also a team that has 9 games under Jonathan Smith without a sack. 9. I mean, think about that. There were 6 games last year. There's 3 games this year that Michigan State's defense has not registered a sack. He's had more games in his tenure as Michigan State's coach without a sack than he does with a sack.
What is that? Is that a fundamental?
It might be a little bit on the other way. Yeah.
Is it a financial issue because those edge guys cost more money? I mean, That it's just so jarring, right? That you can't have any solution to that problem at all. Even if you're like, the old Madden engage 8 play once every once in a while, just to, break that streak up. I mean, I'm kind of joking, but I'm kind of not. Like, how does that not get home to that degree?
Well, when you don't have the talent that on the edge, and you lost a lot of the talent that the previous staff had brought in, and who knows? I mean, it's the early NIL era, so we don't know what they were paying at that point. So maybe there's not money, and without the transparency of knowing how much is available and being used in NIL money, anything's possible, up or down from estimates. But you're right. I mean, that edge rush position and offensive tackle are the two most expensive positions, right? Where's Michigan State struggled at? On the offensive line and on the defensive line. I mean, there's a correlative effort there to just kind of look at it and say, okay, maybe there's not enough talent available there. And, they've got the injuries up front on the offensive line, and then, with Ramil and Phillips and that. But on the defensive line, I mean, I think Jalen Thompson is underproduced. I think that's one of the things. I like some of their younger guys that this staff brought in. Lafaella was looking good. He gets hurt. I think David Santiago has a few years of eligibility left after coming in from Air Force. He's still on a learning curve.
He plays hard, though. Santiago, I feel like he plays hard.
He does. And he's good in pursuit as well. But pursuit from the backside versus, straight line rushing and getting to the quarterback. I mean, that's in a lot of ways a Jimmy's and Joe's. There's a reason guys were at their previous stops, right? Lafaella was at Wisconsin, high major program. Santiago was at Air Force, mid-major, low major program. The Cam Williams, the Division II school. So, I mean, you're not getting, it's not like you're getting guys like Michigan State sent into the portal on the way back. Although it's at the same point, those projects that Mel Tucker recruited, like by Jober at Miami of Ohio. So, think about the hype train that was along with some of those guys and what hasn't come to fruition with that. That previous staff's analysis of players maybe plays a little factor in it, even if there's only, how many, Graham, did you say there's 28 guys left from the Tucker era?
28 players from the Tucker era who went through that 2023 season who are part of this Michigan State team. Yeah, you think, to Chris's point, I think it's a lot telling. I mean, I think if, people love Mike Elko right now, and you know what? If Michigan State had spent, $6 to $8 million on Michigan, on their defensive line, like Texas A&M, sounds like they did. People might like Jonathan Smith a little more, Joe Rossi a little more too. Like, a lot of this is just not having the talent base. And in the old days, you had time to develop it, and you don't now. You need momentum, and they haven't been good in the Nebraska games, the UCLA games, the 50-50 games. Michigan last year, a game they had some measure of control in, the way they got pasted by Rutgers at the end. If it was just, they were a gritty team that ran up against certain teams they couldn't contend with, people would be patient, even if they weren't connecting entirely with Jonathan Smith, or at least more patient. They're not patient because they don't think the coaching competence and acumen has been as advertised either.
When I hear about everything that's going on in both of those lines over there, I just reflect on Michigan, and it just goes to show, in my opinion, how success can breed success, right? I mean, think about the pedigree that Michigan has to build on both of those units, right? Like, even though it's been a few years now, Michigan on the offensive line, you're recruiting like, oh, hey, we just won back-to-back Joe Moore Awards. And then when we were a semifinalist, we won a national championship. Or then if you look on the defensive line, particularly the edge room, I mean, Aiden Hutchinson, Kwity Paye, Ajabo, even lesser guys like McGregor and Jalen Harrell and Josiah Stewart. I mean, it's just a turnstile of NFL talent. And you can just say, come here and we'll put you in the NFL. And now they got Derek Moore. Now they're moving Jayshawn Barham down there. Even guys who haven't popped like TJ Guy and Dom Nichols. I think Michigan State would probably kill for a TJ Guy right about now. Yeah. And he's kind of lost his role. And so just bringing it back to this game, I mean, it's just so difficult to see how those two sides of the ball, everything in the trenches, which is always where this game is determined. Michigan just seems to have such a noted advantage on both sides.
I do. I think so too. I think the only way forward for Michigan State to pull an upset is, the one thing Michigan doesn't have is an offense that runs away from you all that often. And so I think Michigan State can move the ball on them anyway through the passing game to some degree. If they can protect Childs long enough for him to keep his wits about him and keep his confidence, because they've done it to some degree against everybody they've played. And they've played some good defensive lines in Indiana and USC, and they've been able to move the ball. And so to me, it's like, is Chris called, I love the term Chris used about MSU's receivers earlier this year. He called them equalizers. And they are, in matchups like this, the way you have a chance is if the guys who are your equalizers, your playmakers, can get theirs no matter what. And then, you catch a few breaks somewhere else, or the other team doesn't have the offensive punch to really put the game away. And the MSU's going to need that, because they are not going to win on either side of the line of scrimmage. That is, I think, pretty certain. So the question is, can they hang in the game, and can they score enough to put some pressure on Michigan, or make, and then they've got to make, Bryce Underwood uncomfortable. They've got to find a way to do it. If they don't, and that doesn't just mean getting home to him. That means in the back end. And, there's no risk in trying something creative in terms of coverages and blitzes, because the defense as is doesn't work. You're not risking anything. You're risking giving up a touchdown. You're going to give up plenty of them as is. And so I think that's the other place Michigan State is.
Tony, you went through all that list of all the guys that are able to churn over that NFL talent. And somehow you left out the biggest one in Larry Ellison. I don't know how that happened.
Yeah. The finances certainly help. There's no doubt about that. And I think it's actually Jolene who gets the credit.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about, the money that's flowing through the program, and that helps. I mean, when you talk about Bryce Underwood, look at the money that he reportedly is making, right? I mean, that's, where that isn't, there is no equalizer in the donor base for Michigan State like that. There's donors, but nothing to that fervor, I guess. And, in this day and age, you got to talk about that. And that's now a new requirement for athletic directors to figure out. So
how mad is Illinois about the Ellison situation? Like, that's their guy. Like, how does that, I would
both of you gentlemen are married. All three of you gentlemen are married. I'm engaged. So you guys are supposed to know how this works even more than I do. You know who calls the shots.
I'm not giving any millions of dollars to anybody. I'm not even someone to go cut my grass that needs cut one more time before the end of the year. But I'll say this. Graham brought up the point about getting to Underwood. It's got to be scheme. It's got to be, the linebackers have to cover over the middle, because the playbook has been out there since even all the way back to the Youngstown State game in Boston College on how to beat Michigan State is get those linebackers in coverage, get them one-on-one, get them over the middle with crossers, use the running backs to get them in the swing passes and screen game, because they're struggling. They're struggling to defend tight ends and running backs. And those are two areas where Michigan has a very decided advantage. And the other part of that is those are the two areas where you make a young quarterback most comfortable throwing to, because he doesn't have to stretch the field. So then you can pick and choose your ability to, and times you want to throw downfield. And who knows what Michigan State's secondary is going to look like. They've got both starting safeties in Malik Spencer and Mekhi Martinez. And Martinez has been out for a while, and, Spencer's questionable. He got pulled after a touchdown in the third quarter at Indiana. So I don't know how much that is injury based versus production based with him, but they've struggled to cover. They've struggled to communicate on the back end of the defense. And, that's honestly, to me, the biggest thing for Michigan State. This is one of those games where if you go into it, you have to be playing with your hair on fire on defense. You have to, it's why they were in it a year ago, right? Their defense played at a higher level than they had in many other games. And this is, they're giving up like well over 6 yards a pop under Joe Rossi. And, that's not a recipe to win right there. I given up, I think, I did the numbers on this last night. They're giving up right now this season, it appears, let's see here, 6.76 yards per play, 4.76 yards per carry. And this is against Power 4 competition, right? This is the more important number. They're giving up 74.8% completion to opposing quarterbacks against Power Conference schools. That's not a winning recipe for football right there.
And if you look back at this last week, just how Michigan sort of found its form, right? It was Bryce Underwood's best day. He was 21 of 27, so right around that 74% mark. His leading receiver, like they've Donovan McCulley and Andrew Marsh have really been coming on in recent weeks, but it was Zach Marshall who had 3 grabs for 29 yards in his career before last week. He had 5 for 72 and a touchdown. He was using Jordan Marshall as an outlet in the backfield, and they didn't even have Justice Haynes available, right? It's just, there are and Marlon Klein wasn't available. Hogan Hansen wasn't available. So, I mean, all 5 of those guys could be decided problems in this one. And just going back to last year's game, you talk about Michigan State's defense, like sort of leveling up. I think the fact that Michigan was incapable of the advent of the forward pass at that time also really helped, right? Like Bryce Underwood is better than all 3 of those quarterbacks last year combined. Like if you took each one of their best skill sets and you molded them into one, they're still not even what a true freshman Bryce Underwood is in terms of talent. I mean, he's been last week on PFF. He had 3 big time throws, no turnover worthy plays. He's protecting the ball. Like Andrew and I were talking about it on Hail Yes earlier this week. Like either way, like how could Michigan lose this game, or what is Michigan State's path to victory? It has to be turnovers. I mean, you have to win, I think, by 2. And Michigan has only lost the turnover margin 1 time this year, and that was at USC when they were blown out. So it's just like any way you slice it, it's like this one is hard to find.
Well, I think last week's game was especially discouraging for Michigan State fans because, before that game, Underwood I believe he was last in the Big Ten in completion percentage, right, Tony? And Michigan State's weakness seems to be, or the biggest weakness seems to be, those over the middle, tight end drag routes, those running back routes over the middle, basically anything over the middle of the field. It's not just, they're not getting pressure, but their communication issues seem to be there as well when I've been watching. And so the Underwood being able to take advantage of some of those underneath throws and really feather them in. And, last week he said 21 of 27 or something along those lines, almost 80% completion percentage. If he's able to do that, I mean, it's going to be lights out for Michigan State, I think. But Michigan State's going to have to try to get creative, like Graham said, and, force a turnover here and there. And those things can be a little finicky, right? Like that's what gamblers look at in the NFL. Like, okay, well, they were plus whatever on turnovers last year. Odds are they're going to be negative on turnovers this year, right? So those are the type of things you would point to for Michigan State, as far as, maybe we get a little turnover luck here. Maybe a freshman quarterback on the road. But I really don't see, and obviously the receiver advantage, Nick Marsh and the receiving core seems to be still a strength of this team,
I think you have to find a way. This is the first time Bryce Underwood's still seeing things, right? Like he is a true freshman. And so, and the progress isn't always linear with a young quarterback. And so you've got to, I know there have been other weeks where Michigan State has struggled because all of a sudden they've seen that one side of the ball or something they hadn't seen before and struggled to adjust to it. You've got to make Michigan adjust to something they haven't seen on tape from you. You've got to find something you haven't used or put something else in there, because you're right. I think, I don't think they can win this game without winning the turnover battle, whether that's 1 or 2 or whatever, but it's got to be, it just, the problem is, a lot of times turnovers are an indication of luck, right? A team that wins the turnover margin, that's not a great reason. If they've got the best record, well, that tells you something. But sometimes it's also because you just don't cause a lot of disruption. And Michigan State is ranked 100th nationally in turnover margin. And Aiden Childs largely, he's had a few moments, but he hasn't been the turnover machine he was last year. He's been pretty good. The lack of turnovers have been forcing turnovers. And I don't know that easily changes, because just at a certain point, you're 7 games in, like you don't do a lot that causes other teams issues and makes them confused. And now this game has a way of being different. Right? It's a different atmosphere. If you've never played in it and Underwood want to play in it, it can be a different kind of physicality. It can be a different kind of pressure. It can feel different. And so maybe that helps. But yeah, I think you're 100% right. The turnovers they have to win the turnover battle and not just break even. And I think they have to win it to really have a shot.
Michigan number 3, tied for number 3 in the nation. They have forced 14 takeaways, and they've given the ball away just 5 times.
Yeah, and you mentioned Aiden Childs. I mean, he needs to elevate his game. I mean, I think that's, if Michigan State, you got to score points. You can't go. They went down to Indiana and scored 13 points. They've been decent in the red zone this year, but those field goals have to be touchdowns, right? I think the other thing too to keep in mind is that, when you mention about doing different things on the defensive side of the ball, you saw some things last week at Indiana that Michigan State's offense did that were different. They went at the zone over the middle of the field, something that really they hadn't done. And those are plays that, Nick Marsh getting them an open field, whether it be quick swing passes, whether it be slants that they haven't really used a whole lot. They have to show the adaptability there. And more importantly, if they can play like the offensive line played, and it's a reconfigured offensive line with 4 guys out last week, 4 starters out, 2 of them for the season, they still put together 2 drives at the start of that game of 7 and 8 minutes. I mean, I don't care who you're playing against. Indiana's good defense. That's an impressive drive, no matter if you're playing against Youngstown State or Indiana, but obviously playing against Indiana is even more impressive. So if they're able to find ways to milk the clock and shorten the game that way, that's how you stay in it. I mean, that's the Antonio ball, right? The only difference is you have to have the defense producing too.
Yeah. And if you can get those turnovers we talked about when you had the ball for 7 minutes, I mean, that's how you really, turn a game on its head. But let's zoom out a little bit here and go back kind of big picture where we started. Graham, what does a Michigan State win actually do for Jonathan Smith and company? And then I'll ask the same question for Tony. If Michigan State were to beat Sharon Moore, doesn't that totally flip that regime on its head? It's kind of a big swing game for both sides.
Yeah, I don't know. It would be interesting to find out. I think certainly any sort of change in tide, and that's what I think the way it was phrased by Jonathan Smith, but true change in tide where the current is just against him. I think anything like that begins with a win over Michigan. It's on its own. It's not enough. And I think that goes back to the question early on, like people fearing a win over Michigan to some degree because what that means for the future. And I don't think just beating Michigan would be enough, in my estimation, for Jonathan Smith to likely return as head coach. I do think, though, if they don't beat Michigan, there is you just can't. It's very hard to see any sort of path. But I also think there's value in the game beyond what it means for him because, it was interesting the other day, Nick Marsh talked about, the 2021 game and how he was on the sidelines, how much that, was sort of his introduction to what this meant. And he goes back, he's inspired by that game. He watches it over before they play this matchup every year, or when they play Michigan. And he was 15, just turned 15, sophomore recruit on the sideline. You get further away from the last time you beat Michigan. You're selling a dream. You're selling something that people can't relate to. Next year's incoming freshman will be 7 or 8 years old when trouble in the snap happened. So like you get further and further away from it, and you need to keep some sort of foothold in the rivalry long term. And I think whether a lot of these players stick with the program, whether Jonathan Smith's around with the program, even if he's not, he will be remembered differently if he wins this game. That win will be appreciated. I think once you discover somebody isn't a fit or isn't who you think should be leading your program long term, one game should not determine that. And so that decision has been that's the path they're headed down, then this win alone won't do it. But, you beat Michigan, you can look at the schedule coming up. It's a little more manageable, and you could see a path where, in theory, they could have a run of wins. The problem is who Michigan State is as a team. I mean, every one of those teams they're about to play is looking at Michigan State as a team they can beat. The idea that Michigan State, as they are right now constructed, who they've been, are going to put together a run of wins seems just very unlikely.
Yeah, and I don't know how much, it's part of my job to consider the possibility of both outcomes, but I don't know how much I've even considered a loss for Michigan here, right? I mean, I don't think it would be necessarily like the end of Sharon Moore's tenure or something, but it would be a 5-alarm bell fire catastrophe, right? Like any goodwill that was built up last year by the finish, by putting up 50 against Northwestern, the stunner against Ohio State, and then following it up with a win against Alabama to really, I've never seen a 5-5 season that was so dead then being looked back at as like, all right, well, like we made some steps and it just switched so quickly at the end of the year. And usually that doesn't happen after the story is largely written on the season. This would undo a lot of that, I think, if should there be a loss. And there would be questions about everything, right? About the direction of the program. How could something have gone so wrong? Because what's really happened under Sharon is they have lost the games where they were, quote unquote, supposed to lose, right? Texas last year, Oregon last year, Indiana last year. Those are all CFP teams. This year, Oklahoma. This year at USC. Those are theoretically, at the beginning of the year, you can see all of those as losses. Now, the problem is that there's so many games you can see as losses, but there hasn't been a quote unquote like bad loss, an inexplicable loss. I guess maybe on the road at Illinois last year is about as close as there was, but even at Washington was a tough place to play. This would be the first one where you are like notable favorites and lost. Like both their losses this year are as underdogs. All 5 of their wins this year are as favorites. They've kind of been living right where they should. And so if you lose a game, 14.5 points now? That would be no bueno.
Wouldn't be a surprise, though. I mean, it wouldn't be a surprise. I mean, that's how this rivalry has always been. I mean, there's the times that Michigan State has rose up and punched up it when they weren't expected to. Have been in those situations where Michigan is usually up there, and winning the games that they're supposed to win. And it's double digits on the spread against Michigan State. But emotion comes into this. I mean, that's why anytime you see a double digit spread, you just run from it because, 9 times out of 10 in this rivalry, it doesn't turn out that way. 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a single score, just a single digit game.
No, that's true. But I've been trying to think about that. Which is the last game? Like, I think we can say, I mean, like the COVID season, like a win is a win. And obviously that's like the greatest example, but that is really different, right? Without the fans being there. What do you point to in the more recent history of that? Cause like when Michigan State was winning all those games in 11 and 13 and 14 and 15,
they became the favorite.
They were exactly. So which are these times where they are a lopsided underdog other than 20?
2016 is a big one because that was, or not 16. Yeah, 16. They're 25.5 point dog, Michigan State, and it was a 9-point game. Now that game got a little closer late.
Yeah, wasn't it like 20 points in the fourth quarter?
Yeah, it didn't feel like it. But yeah, you're right. But there have been what we have seen certainly with Michigan State, like last year is a great example of how the game and the moment can become something that helps undo you a little bit, and the momentum just swings one way. And if you're not mature enough to handle it, and you're right, it's happened more to Michigan State than Michigan on that end. You could argue though, like from a Michigan 2021. Now I know that wasn't a huge line that day, but that took a great day from Kenneth Walker, right? And that overall that Michigan team was better than Michigan State, and yet a great player was too much for them, right? And a great player determined that game, and Vegas might have had it wrong. It's a good point. Like winning both lines of scrimmage. I think one thing that's interesting here is we talk about Bryce Underwood.
Hold on, Graham. Michigan State did not win the line of scrimmage that day in 2021.
I didn't say they did.
That was Kenneth Walker that won that game. Like, the holes were not big, and they were not very big. I mean, I think looking back in terms of the games that Michigan State would have been expected to win, I think, obviously the D'Antonio era changed a lot of things. I mean, because he put such an emphasis on this game that I don't necessarily know what Jonathan Smith does. I mean, they've said, well, they've been putting emphasis on this since preseason practice, since fall camp. This is a 24/7, 365 deal for D'Antonio and his program. And, I asked one of the guys if D'Antonio had spoken to them yet about this game or how much he had spoken to him. And they said, no, not yet. So I wonder if that's not the rabbit in the hat that Smith pulls out late week, bringing Mark D'Antonio use his fire, because they already had Ken Mannion talking about the rivalry. But before that, I mean, it was always hit or miss. Both sides, and everybody's getting a little long in the tooth in some ways. Both sides forget that period that you were mentioning earlier, Tony, the 02 to 07 period when Michigan had won 6 in a row, and the dominance that was there, right? I mean, you were surprised, like, I can't believe it's been that long. Well, it was like that for, basically 40 years before that, since Duffy Doherty, in that 66, 67 season. And I think, Bo's first season, you beat them. And this is what Graham said earlier, I believe they changed their offense. Then they run like more of a wishbone offense in that game, Bo's first year, and caught him completely off guard. I mean, there's history for some of this. There's always history in this rivalry that you can go back to and look at. But, there's also a lot more NFL talent to what Graham was saying. Like, you mentioned that 21 game. There was more NFL talent on the Michigan State side. Whether or not you can get Nick Marsh and Aiden Childs, because that's your chance. If you get Nick Marsh and Aiden Childs playing at the highest level, that's your Michigan State's chance to win.
So, yeah, one of the things, going back to what we were about Bryce Underwood and Aiden Childs, the difference is, I think that Bryce Underwood's got an extremely high ceiling. I think he's got a higher ceiling than Aiden Childs based on what we've seen. I do not think today, based on what I've seen, that you'd be more likely to win a game with Bryce Underwood than Aiden Childs. I think if you put Bryce Underwood in Michigan State's offensive line as a true freshman, and he had to deal with that, he'd have some games that have looked like the worst of Aiden Childs for sure. And that's just the way it is naturally with a freshman. That's the key for Michigan State is like when you start a freshman quarterback, and I am amazed that anybody in Michigan had expectations beyond 9-3. Like you are penciling in usually 3 losses. I don't care how talented you are. It is an amazing thing to expect more than that. And I don't know that people did, but it certainly that can go wrong on a given day. But he just has to be who he's been. That's the key. Underwood just has to be who he's been. He might have to make a couple of difficult throws here and there, and he's shown he can do it. Childs has to elevate his play for them to have a chance. He has to be the best version of himself. And we've seen that at times. Nick Marsh has to elevate his play and be a player. I mean, they need Nick Marsh to have one of those 10-catch, 155-yard, 2-touchdown type games that, we haven't seen really from him yet. We've seen, he's a ferocious talent, but can he just, and those other receivers, Kelly and McCray, who are dangerous complementary pieces, like all of those guys have to elevate their play and have a day. In Michigan, they just have to be who they are. They're the better team. And so that's what in 2021, that's what happened. You had a guy elevate his play and be the very best of who he was as a great player already in Kenneth Walker. And they had more talent. Look, they had 2 NFL receivers as well. But this team has, from a receiver standpoint, is close to what they don't have a Kenneth Walker. So that's the question. Can Michigan State elevate its play enough where it's capable of doing so to give this thing a go?
Yeah, I look back at some history, and Michigan State was a 4-point underdog in 2021 when they won. So, we're talking like 10 extra points there. The other one I would maybe point to is 2017. I couldn't find the spread online when I was just looking here, but Michigan State on the road, and they kind of pulled off that upset when no one really knew how good that team kind of was or ended up being when they finished 10-3. I was just kind of looking back at some recent history. But Tony, do you want to make a prediction here or any final thoughts you want to share about just how you see this game going? Because, it seems like we kind of know where you stand on that, right?
Yeah, I think so. Contrary to how I've been sounding, I do think Michigan State finds a way to cover because of everything that Chris and Graham were saying, the nature of the rivalry. These games are often tighter than you might think they otherwise would be. And 14.5, you and I talked about it on the other pod, Andrew, that hook, I will take that. I will take that half point all day long. So I think my early pick was 31-19, maybe 31-17 will be my final pick, somewhere around there. And so it could be close, right? Like that could be a 24-17 game, early fourth, that just talent wins out, or the team that's handled the moment better shows that they handled the moment better again. But I guess before they give their picks too, my question about what is the way to get those receivers involved for Michigan State? Because after USC, it seemed like screen game, right, was clearly the answer, because Michigan just got gashed in the quick game by Maeva and Lemon and Lane and McCree and like the tight ends and all of that. But if they completely fix their alignment, their assignment, their angles against Washington, and Washington wasn't able to run, it wasn't able to manufacture a screen game as sort of that pseudo run game, and then there wasn't enough time to take the shots downfield, right? So it's just, they're going to have to, there's going to have to be, somebody's going to have to make someone miss some tackles. I think you might have to reverse engineer this, right? You have to use, I can't believe, Chris, my money was on you to be the one to say it. What is it, 48 of the last 55 winners of this game have won the rushing battle? Last year was sort of the anomaly. Yeah, in order to get there, I think for Michigan State, they would have to reverse engineer it, because I don't know that they're going to be able to come out of the gate and run the ball. They're going to have to soften up the defense in some way to win the numbers in the box and then go for it. So how does that happen?
Well, listen, maybe the only way that they get a run game established is if they use Aiden Childs in the run game. And it's something they haven't done. And when I say that, I'm saying featuring him, not use him as a complementary rushing attack, not use him, when he's getting chased for his life. I'm saying design an offense around Aiden Childs running the ball, because he is their best rushing option. You saw that last week with the 64-yard run he broke off in the second half. The acceleration, the vision to get through things. That's stuff that can't be taught. And that's something that the Michigan State's running backs don't have. And sometimes it's partly because of the running backs are sophomores and they're on a learning curve. Some of it's because the offensive line has struggled and Childs has been on the run for his life, but they got to block and protect for him too, So maybe that's how you do that. Maybe you design some things to get him going north and south rather than being chased east and west all the time, and then use the middle game, right? You use the middle game and short passes that they showed last week against Indiana, because I think those 13 points against Indiana's defense to me are more that can translate into a couple more touchdowns, I think, against Michigan's defense, which is maybe a notch below it, especially when you add in the intensity of the rivalry, being at home and everything else. So, but also you got to stop somebody. You got to stop somebody. And that can't happen. You can't you give Bryce Underwood the time that Fernando Mendoza had. He's going to look good. Is he going to put up 5 straight touchdowns? Maybe not. But, you got to do something on the other side of the ball as well on a scheme and game plan thing that's going to resonate.
And don't overlook fourth down in this one quickly, because this is the game where teams will make sure you don't want to err on the side of caution. You need to be aggressive to take this game. Michigan is actually last in the nation, 1 of 9 on fourth downs this year. And so,
are you talking from an offensive standpoint?
Yes, offensively.
The problem with that, though, is that they're probably not going to get to many fourth downs because Michigan State's third down defense has been so terrible. They're giving up about 49.5% conversion rate on third down.
So say Michigan is 8 of 13 on third down, right? And then on 3 of those 5, they go for it. If they convert 2 of them and 10 times you move the sticks, right? That's blouses. There's just no way to overcome that, barring some miracle turnovers.
Yeah. I think if are we doing predictions now that we're headed with this, and
I think so. Yeah, fire away if you got one.
Yeah, I think to Chris's point, can they turn a couple extra? They can move the ball well against Indiana. They move the ball as well as anybody has moved the ball against Indiana. That was a really promising game, and the 13 points, for people that didn't see it, doesn't look great. But their first 2 drives were the longest 2 drives against Indiana all this whole season, longer than anything Oregon did. And then they had where they've been really good in the red zone. They were 1 of 3. And then they had 3 other plays where they got inside the 40-yard line, 3 other drives inside the 40-yard line where they got nothing. But they moved the ball the entire game. And so I think they're going to move the ball. The question is, can they finish drives? And can they, if I'm going to pick 31-20, and that's 2 touchdowns, 2 field goals. But if you get a situation where 2 of those other 2 field goals become touchdowns, and maybe there's another field goal somewhere in there, and if there's a turnover or whatever, then you've got a situation where you may have a game at the very end. The problem they're going to have is much as Michigan has not run away from people, I don't believe Michigan has faced a defense with this many deficiencies yet. Now the Wisconsin game, they didn't put a ton of points up against Wisconsin or Nebraska in certain ways. So I guess that's where the hope is. But I see it being, 31-20, a game that's not decided until late, but Michigan sort of feels like they have the upper hand. And the problem with Michigan State's defense is when you have a defense that's struggling the way they are, there's sort of an absence of hope. When you watch them play, you're like, oh, how are they going to get off the field? And when it happens, they stop somebody, it feels like the offense better do it now. They got to take advantage of this. It just puts a lot on you. I'll be surprised if Michigan State wins again. We've talked about in this rivalry, crazy things happen, but 31-20 Michigan.
You want to know quickly my unscientific method for the measure of how good or how bad a defense is. So we all obviously watch these games in person, so it doesn't work quite as well for us. But whenever you're watching football on TV, when there's a deep shot and that ball goes off the screen, what is the feeling in your gut? Is that ball going to be is that going to be a deep completion, or is that going to be batted down, whatever? For decades, when you're watching the Lions, a deep shot, it's oh boy, here we go, right? And now these days, it's well, Kirby Joseph is about to come down with that, or Brian Branch is going to go make a play on that ball, or something like that. Or in the heyday of MSU, right, in 11 and 13, Darqueze Dennard or Johnny Adams or Curtis Drummond, one of those guys, they're going to go make a play on the ball. How do you feel about that? These in this day and age, I feel do you either of you subscribe to that theory?
Is that feeling in your gut? Yeah. Yeah, sure.
No, because it doesn't matter if it's through the air or on the ground. You just kind of, at this point, the way the defense has played the last few weeks, you just know that it could be either or. It could be an underneath shot. It could be a quick shot. You've seen quick screen passes against this defense turn into big gains. So big plays have been a big issue for this defense in every facet.
Not great.
That said, none of these games are rivalry games where the intensity elevates. So
I don't think Chris liked your theory, Tony.
I've got Michigan winning 28-24 because I do think this is going to be a slugfest, just very much like last year. They went down to Ann Arbor last year. I know, personnel changes so much now year over year. So it's a little different, but there's personnel now important personnel, I think, which is the key here for Michigan State that now has the taste of the rivalry, the end of the end of the game fight. I think they're very cautious right now to not talk about it. But come on, you mean to tell me that no, we didn't think about it. We don't watch it. I've been around this rivalry and these teams long enough. Everything's talked about at all times, including that fight at the end of the game. So, we'll see how Michigan State comes out and establishes themselves. And I think that's going to be one of the things that, and Jalen Thompson talked about it. This is the game that it's not about the beginning. It's about the second punch. It's about who throws the second punch to show it. I think Michigan State's got a second punch, but unfortunately, like when you're throwing body blows and you're going against haymakers, you get knocked out pretty quickly. But I think they hang into here being at home, and I just don't think they have enough horses to finish it because finishing has been an issue for this team.
There's been a lot of, I wrote about it on Freep.com. I feel like there's a lot of he said with this rivalry, right? It's just so what color are your glasses, right? And that's always going to sort of paint this picture. And even in 22 in the tunnel, Michigan is going to say that the Michigan State players jumped them, and the Michigan State players are going to say, well, they were taunting us as we're walking back to the locker room, right? And then in 24, Colston Loveland infamously afterwards said, little bro going to do little bro things. It's like, well, you headbutted Anthony Jones, and then he ripped your head off right by their sideline. And then, Sharon Moore talked about his introduction to the rivalry was Devin Bush when Michigan State's doing its pregame walk across the field, and then Michigan says, oh, they're walking like stormtroopers. And then Michigan State's like, well, we do this every game. You know this. I mean, we've seen this in basketball last year on the logo on your senior day. Like, there's always going to be some coloring of this. And the team that avoids that is obviously for the better. And hopefully we don't have anything to write about. I think the only bigger rivalry is me, and I needed to get this in there at some point, against Graham's soccer tweets. And I've been coming at him about this for months. and
what Tony doesn't know is if soccer was available when he was a kid, the way it is today, he would not be doing this podcast. He'd be doing a soccer podcast right now. We all would be watching soccer this weekend because it's a better product and it's packaged better. So,
Graham, you're 15 years older than Tony.
What does that have to do with the price tea in China? I don't.
I mean, why aren't you doing a soccer podcast right now?
Because I just became a Giant fan when I was 40. It was a whole different,
But that's my question. Like, we're all organic fans of the American sports, like based on where we grew up. Like, that's my thing, is that my Twitter feed overnight became just, and this is why I support you, because I think you're on the anti-Tottenham train. How are all these people just randomly Tottenham fans now? Like, where is your tie? Like, you just picked them through osmosis, and that's not what sports is about. That's what gets me.
You're making my argument for me. Absolutely. I'm not saying people should fandom should choose you. You shouldn't choose fandom.
What's a soccer?
Yeah, that's what I said. So Chris, you can help him pick out whatever dinner. Cause I mean, he never agreed to this. So it's sort of like a one-way thing, but I told him every time he tweeted about soccer, he owed me $1. There has to be 50 of them since I declared this over the summer, directly or indirectly. So, I mean, I think what's that? I don't know if we're allowed to plug anything. That nice, place in like Old Town, Lansing, the meat place,
the barbecue place.
Meat, yeah,
it's literally called meat.
Yeah, meat.
Yes, meat. Called
okay,
meat.
yeah, meat.
I'll take you. Meat, not far from meat is a soccer bar too. We can go there after.
Okay,
well,
very good.
I think Andrew should treat us for this. How about?
Oh, wow.
Let's just wear it
nice
out.
Of you.
Yeah, I think that works for me.
I mean, I quietly have a fantasy Premier League team. I'm in a whole league and stuff, so I guess I'm not as good at promoting it like Graham. So
that's because you're friends with Connor Wilton.
No, Connor, my friend. So no one cares about this, but my best friend growing up is from England. So, and his grandpa was a Liverpool fan. So then I was like, you know what? I'll join Liverpool. It's like a fun team. This is like 2010. So I've been on the bandwagon for a while now, and it is fun to root for a squad. But I respect Graham's takes because you're like Bournemouth. I really like their back four in this matchup against Crystal Palace. I'm like, wow, Graham is like you're deep in it, man. Like you're in the.
I just wish you guys would start following an American sport like I do and watch NPB baseball from baseball from Japan overnight. Come on.
I'm talking to the Japan baseball fan over here, and he's going to give you a hard time about watching soccer.
I think we've gone off the rails officially now.
I'm the Larry Ellison of Torquay United, so 6th division team in the English Riviera. So a little contributor here, partial owner of the trust.
Who's your Bryce Underwood?
It's a smaller budget. I'll say that. It's
All right, fellas. So it was fun. Thanks for all making this happen. And hopefully we can make it a yearly tradition now. And next year we'll be doing it for the game in Ann Arbor. But as always, thanks to everyone who makes it possible. Thanks to Robin Chan, who's on the audio, and our sports editor, Bill Bradley, and everyone else who makes it all, turn around. So we'll talk to you guys soon. Make sure to check out the coverage on lsj.com, freep.com. Plenty of content coming in the next few days. So we'll see you guys there.